My nephew is only 13, but he already takes pride in making other kids cry. He laughs at their pain, mocks their differences, and wears cruelty like a badge of honor. One afternoon, he boasted to me about how he and his friends had broken down a girl who loved anime and Pokemon, calling her a freak, telling her to grow up, and leaving her in tears. When I finally told him that bullying could destroy him one day, my own sister, his mother, turned on me, accusing me of being too harsh. So now I wonder, am I the villain for speaking the truth, or the only one willing to see the darkness growing inside this boy? I've always believed that families are like mirrors. You don't just see who you are, you see who you might become. Sometimes, though, those reflections are cracked, distorted, or show you a shadow you don't want to face. My family wasn't perfect. We weren't the kind of clan that gathered around a polished mahogany table every Sunday, saying grace and smiling for pictures. We were scattered, imperfect, and more often than not, a little dysfunctional. My sister, 3 years younger than me, was the type of person who loved fiercely but protected recklessly. She'd been through her own struggles, her own heartbreaks, and by the time she had her only son, my nephew, she was already carrying the kind of weariness that comes from a life of too many disappointments. Still, she adored that boy. From the moment he was born, she made him the center of her universe. He wasn't just her child. He was her anchor, her reason to keep moving forward. Maybe that's why she couldn't see the things I saw. Or maybe she saw them, but chose to turn away. My nephew, let's call him Ryan, was never what you'd call an easy kid. Even as a toddler, he was sharper than most children his age. He picked up on little things, noticed details that slipped past other kids, and he used that awareness in ways that were unsettling. At 3, he'd mimic people, my laugh, my mother's accent, and neighbor's limp hand. He'd do it with such accuracy that everyone would burst out laughing. Everyone but me. Because even then, it felt less like innocent mimicry and more like mockery. There's a difference, you know. Kids can be silly, sure, but Ryan's humor always had an edge to it. He wasn't laughing with people. He was laughing at them. And even at that age, he seemed to understand the power of turning someone else into the punchline. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just projecting, being too serious, too cynical. But over time, the pattern became clearer. He found joy in flaws, in quirks, in vulnerabilities. If someone stuttered, if someone tripped, if someone wore mismatched socks, Ryan was the first to point it out, and the last to let it go. My sister would shrug it off. "He's just a kid," she'd say, ruffling his hair. "Don't be so uptight. He's got a sense of humor, that's all." But humor, I thought, should bring people together. Ryan's humor pushed them away. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood back then. Rows of cookie-cutter houses, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes in the street until dusk. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. At least, nothing you'd read about in the paper. Ryan grew up surrounded by that safety, that predictability, and maybe that's why he tested boundaries so early at school. Teachers would sometimes call my sister in for meetings. Not because Ryan wasn't smart, he was, frighteningly so, but because he couldn't resist talking back. He questioned everything, challenged authority. And when he didn't get his way, he'd find ways to embarrass his peers. One teacher once told me privately, "He's the kind of kid who knows exactly where the line is, and he dances right on top of it." That description stuck with me, because it was true. Ryan never went far enough to get into real trouble, but he went far enough to hurt people. I remember one afternoon when I stopped by my sister's house after work. Ryan was about 9 then. He came bursting into the living room, throwing his backpack onto the floor, a smirk plastered on his face. "Guess what I did today?" he said. "What's that?" I asked, half distracted as I loosened my tie. "I told this kid in my class that his shoes looked like they came from a dumpster." Everyone laughed so hard he almost cried. My sister, sitting on the couch, chuckled. "Ryan, don't be mean," she said lightly, but she was smiling, not scolding. Ryan shrugged, triumphant. He deserved it. His shoes were gross, and just like that, the moment passed. No lesson, no consequence. I remember looking at my sister, silently pleading for her to understand. But she just gave me that tired look, as if to say, "Don't make this into a big deal." But it was a big deal. It always had been. See, the thing about small cruelties is that they add up. They teach a child how much power lies in pointing a finger, in drawing a crowd, in turning someone else into a spectacle. By the time Ryan was 10, he'd mastered that art. He could zero in on a weakness faster than anyone I'd ever seen. If a kid was overweight, he'd call them marshmallow. If a kid had acne, he'd joke about pepperoni pizza. If a kid wore glasses, he'd mimic the nerd stereotype until the entire class was howling. And the worst part? He didn't just stop when the laughter started. He doubled down. He kept going, pushing until his target broke. That's when he'd smile, the widest wind he saw the tears. I don't want to paint Ryan as a monster. He wasn't always cruel. He could be sweet, affectionate even, when he wanted to be. He'd hug his mum tight after a bad day. He'd draw little doodles of superheroes and proudly show them off. He loved video games, loved making up silly voices, loved staying up late watching movies when I'd babysit. But those moments of innocence were fleeting, swallowed up by something darker. Maybe it was the way my sister raised him. She was a single mom, working long hours, juggling bills, exhaustion, and loneliness. She didn't have the energy to enforce discipline, to pick battles over sarcasm or sharp words. She wanted to keep the peace, to keep him happy, and in doing so, she let him get away with too much. Or maybe it was something innate, something inside him that delighted in control, in watching the world bend under his jokes, his taunts, his commentary. All I knew was that, from the very beginning, I had this gnawing feeling. Ryan wasn't just a mischievous kid. He was walking down a path that could lead somewhere dangerous. That's why, whenever I visited, I watched him closely. I noticed the way he scanned a room, like he was sizing everyone up. I noticed how he tested boundaries with me making jokes about my thinning hair, my old car, my dating life. Once, when he was maybe 11, he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "No wonder you don't have a girlfriend. Who would date a guy who wears the same shirt all the time?" The table laughed, my sister included. I forced a smile, but inside I felt a sting. Not because of the insult itself, but because of the way Ryan delivered it. There was calculation in his tone. He wasn't just being silly, he was aiming, targeting, and hitting the mark. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about that sting. I imagined how it must feel for kids his age, kids without the armor of adulthood, kids who didn't know how to brush it off. And I realized, I, a grown man, could feel that small jab. How deep must his words cut into his peers? It's important to understand all of this, because when the real story begins, the one where Ryan crosses a line that even I couldn't ignore, you have to see that the signs were there all along. The cruelty didn't come out of nowhere. It had been growing, nurtured by laughter, protected by excuses, ignored by love that was too blind. By the time he turned 13, Ryan wasn't just the class clown. He was something else, something sharper, something colder, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. Asterisk. Children are supposed to be messy. They stumble, they break things, they test limits. That's part of growing up. But with Ryan, the mess always seemed deliberate, calculated, almost like he was running little experiments to see just how much damage he could cause without getting caught or without being punished. When he was around 7, there was a girl who lived 2 houses down from my sister's place. Her name was Emily. She was quiet, the kind of kid who clutched books to her chest like they were shields. Ryan didn't play with her often. In fact, he barely acknowledged her existence unless she walked past at the wrong moment. One summer afternoon, I was in the driveway fixing my car when Emily rode by on her bike. The chain was rusty, the frame a little too small for her, and it squeaked with every turn of the pedals. Ryan was out front with a water gun, laughing with a couple of neighborhood boys. "Hey, Emily," he shouted. "Your bike sounds like it's farting." The boys erupted into laughter. Emily flushed, kept pedaling, but Ryan wasn't done. He mimicked the squeaking noise loudly, exaggerating it until the boys doubled over. I could see Emily's shoulders tighten as she disappeared down the street. I wanted to step in, to tell him to knock it off, but I hesitated. He was just a kid, right? And kids tease each other. At least, that's what I told myself. Looking back, I realized that moment mattered. It wasn't just teasing. It was about control. He saw the discomfort on Emily's face, and instead of stopping, he leaned into it. He found the weakness and pressed. At school, his mischief escalated. Teachers called him clever, quick-witted, even charismatic. But behind those compliments were warning notes. Ryan tends to disrupt class with jokes at other students. Ryan struggles with empathy. When classmates are upset, I remember attending one of his elementary school plays, one of those chaotic productions where kids wear cardboard costumes and stumble through lines. Ryan was supposed to play a tree. A tree. Most kids would have been embarrassed or shy, but Ryan leaned into it, cracking jokes backstage, making faces until the kids around him couldn't stop giggling. When one boy missed his cue, Ryan whispered just loud enough for everyone in the row to hear, "He's dumber than a tree, and I'm the tree." The kids laughed, the poor boy froze, and the teacher had to rush in to redirect him. Afterward, my sister praised Ryan. "He's such a natural entertainer," she said, beaming. I sat there, uneasy, because it wasn't entertainment. It was humiliation. The thing about Ryan is that he always knew his audience. Around adults, he played the role of the witty kid, the one with quick comebacks that made teachers smirk even as they tried to stay stern. Around kids, though, he turned sharper, crueler, once. During a family barbecue, he decided to entertain his cousins with impressions. Everyone laughed when he mimicked a celebrity or a cartoon character. But then he turned his gaze on his cousin Mark, who had a slight lisp. -S, -S. "Thank you very much." Ryan slurred exaggeratedly, puffing his cheeks. The other kids burst out laughing. Mark's face turned red, his eyes glassy. I stepped in that time. "Ryan, cut it out," I said firmly. He blinked at me, then at the crowd of kids, then smirked. "Relax, uncle," he said. "I'm just kidding." The phrase became his shield. "I'm just kidding." It excused everything. The words were like armor, deflecting blame, making anyone who confronted him seem humorless or uptight. And because he was so young, because he wore that innocent smile, most people let him get away with it. But I didn't forget the look on Mark's face that day. That wasn't harmless fun. That was cruelty wearing a mask. By age 10, Ryan had a reputation in the neighborhood. Parents whispered about him, though not always in negative terms. Some admired his confidence, his sharp tongue. Others, though, started discouraging their kids from hanging out with him. I overheard one mum say, "He's funny, sure, but I don't like the way he makes the other kids feel small." It was a subtle form of exile, one my sister either didn't notice or refused to acknowledge. At home, Ryan continued his antics. He'd rearrange words in my sister's grocery list to make crude jokes. He'd tape down the spray nozzle at the kitchen sink so she'd get drenched. He once put hot sauce in a bottle of soda just to see if she'd notice. Harmless pranks, maybe. But there was always a gleam in his eye, a satisfaction that went beyond simple laughter. He wanted reactions. He wanted to provoke. And when people got angry, when they flushed or sputtered or shouted, he looked triumphant. One night when I was babysitting, I caught him in the backyard with a frog he'd found by the garden. He was poking it with a stick, watching it twitch. "Ryan," I said sharply, "leave the frog alone." He looked up at me, smirking. "I'm not hurting it. I'm just seeing what it does." But the frog was terrified, leaping desperately each time he jabbed at it. I took the stick from him, let the frog hop away. "You can't treat animals like that," I told him. "They feel pain too." Ryan rolled his eyes. "It's just a frog." I remember the chill that ran down my spine, because I'd read about things like this kids who started with animals, who tested boundaries in small, cruel ways before moving on to bigger ones. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just glimpsed something dangerous in him. Of course, I tried to talk to my sister. I told her about the teasing, the pranks, the frog. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "He's a boy," she said. "Boys are rough. You're making it sound worse than it is. He's smart, he's creative. He's going to grow out of it, but what if he doesn't?" I asked. She shook her head, her eyes tired. "Don't put that kind of darkness on him. He's my son. He's not broken." That was the end of it. She refused to see, and maybe, in her heart, she was afraid to see, because acknowledging Ryan's cruelty meant acknowledging her own failure to correct it. The incidents kept piling up. The jokes grew sharper. The pranks grew riskier, and the laughter, always the laughter, was his fuel. Ryan wasn't satisfied unless someone else was the butt of the joke. He craved that power. That moment when all eyes turned to him, when everyone laughed and one person shrank. And I began to wonder, what happens when the small stage of neighborhood kids and cousins isn't enough? What happens when he needs a bigger audience, a bigger victim? Because kids like Ryan don't stay small forever. Their games grow with them. Their cruelty scales up. And by the time he hit middle school, it was clear Ryan wasn't outgrowing anything. He was evolving. The dinner table is supposed to be a place of warmth, a place where families share their days, pass plates of food, maybe argue a little, but always come back together. At my sister's house, though, dinner became Ryan's stage. He learned quickly that all eyes were on him the moment he opened his mouth, and he relished it. One evening, I was invited over for spaghetti. My sister had worked all day and was exhausted, hair falling loose around her face. Ryan sat across from me, twirling his fork, that mischievous smirk tugging at his lips. "So, Mom," he said loudly, "why do you always burn the garlic bread? It's like your special talent." The cousins laughed. Even my sister chuckled nervously, though I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. She tried to redirect, but Ryan pressed harder. "I mean, we should start a tradition, burnt bread Thursdays. Maybe Uncle here likes it black." The table laughed again, but I didn't. I caught my sister's gaze, saw the exhaustion there. But instead of correcting him, she forced another laugh. That was the pattern. Ryan would push, humiliate, dig at her. She'd brush it off, pretend it was fine. Because if she laughed along, maybe it wouldn't sting so much. But I knew better. Words leave bruises you can't see. It wasn't just his mother. Anyone could be his target. One night, his cousin Sarah had a pimple on her forehead. Ryan zeroed in immediately. "Hey, Sarah," he said, "did you get into a fight with a pepperoni pizza?" The kids roared with laughter. Sarah went silent, stabbing her pasta with her fork. I waited, hoping my sister would intervene. She didn't. She said nothing. Finally, I spoke. "Ryan, that's enough. People's feelings matter more than your jokes." He leaned back, grinning. "Come on, Uncle. I'm just keeping things fun." But the room wasn't fun anymore. It was quiet, awkward, heavy. Sarah excused herself early. Ryan looked proud, victorious even. And my sister. She looked ashamed, though she'd never admit it. Family dinners turned into battles. Not loud, not violent, but battles of dignity, where Ryan chipped away at others to build himself taller. The sad part, no one stopped him. His mother enabled him with silence. His cousins laughed to avoid becoming the next target. His friends joined in because they feared exclusion, and I sat there, watching a boy sharpen his cruelty like a blade, meal after meal. Parenting is hard. I'll never deny that. But with my sister, denial became her coping mechanism. Every time I brought up Ryan's behavior, she had an excuse ready. "He's just joking. He's a smart kid. That's why he gets bored. He's got leadership qualities." Leadership. That word stuck with me. Because what kind of leader builds power by tearing others down? One evening, after the garlic bread fiasco, I stayed late to help her clean up. Ryan had gone upstairs, and the house was quiet. As I stacked plates, I said gently, "You know he hurts people when he talks like that." Her shoulders stiffened. "He's a boy. That's what boys do." "No," I said firmly. "That's what bullies do." She spun around, eyes flashing. "Don't you dare call my son a bully. You don't understand him like I do." Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand. But I understood the look on Sarah's face when Ryan mocked her. I understood the tears in Emily's eyes when he made fun of her bike. I understood the cruelty behind that smirk. "You're too hard on him," she continued, voice trembling. "You talk to him like he's some kind of criminal. He's just a kid." I wanted to shout, to shake her, to make her see. But instead, I lowered my voice. "He's a kid now. But if you don't stop this, if you don't guide him, what happens when he's older? When his words turn into actions?" She looked away, her jaw tight. "You don't have children," she whispered. "You don't get to tell me how to raise mine." That was the end of the conversation, but I couldn't shake the dread that sat heavy in my stomach, because deep down, I knew denial is dangerous. A parent's blind spot can become a child's weapon, and Ryan was already learning how to wield it. Middle school is a battlefield. For most kids, it's awkwardness, pimples, bad haircuts, and trying desperately to fit in. But for Ryan, it was opportunity. The hallways weren't just hallways anymore, they were arenas. The cafeteria wasn't just a place to eat, it was a stage. And Ryan, he thrived on the chaos. The first time I realized just how far things had escalated, my sister called me on a Thursday evening. She sounded tired but oddly cheerful. Ryan made honor roll. She announced proudly. And guess what his teachers say? He has a real gift for leadership. I congratulated her, but inside, I hesitated. Leadership again. That word that kept coming up, used by adults who only saw part of the picture. A week later, I was at Ryan's basketball game, squeezed onto the bleachers with a crowd of parents. Ryan wasn't the tallest or the fastest, but he was loud. He shouted orders, cracked jokes, made everyone laugh, even the coach sometimes. But during halftime, as the kids huddled for water, I overheard him. One of his teammates had missed a shot earlier. Ryan leaned in close and said, just loud enough for the others to hear, "Dude, my grandma shoots better than you. Maybe you should join the girls' team." The kids roared. The boy flushed, his shoulders sagging. The coach blew the whistle, telling them to regroup, but I saw the damage done. Ryan smirked. He had won again. At school, he started gathering a circle of friends around him. Not really friends followers. Kids who laughed when he laughed, who joined in when he mocked someone, who basked in the glow of his attention because they knew what happened if they didn't. His targets were always the same, the odd ones out. The quiet kids. The kids who wore the wrong shoes or brought the wrong lunch, or didn't understand the unwritten rules of middle school survival. There was one girl in particular, Anna. She was different. She liked anime, carried around a Pakeman binder, sometimes hummed Mario theme songs under her breath. She wasn't hurting anyone. She was just herself. But to Ryan, she was perfect prey. He started small, snide comments in the hallway. "Nice backpack, Anna. Did your grandma pick it out? Oh, look, it's Pikachu girl. Don't shock us, okay?" The kids around him laughed. Anna looked down, clutching her books tighter. Then it escalated. He'd point out that she sat alone at lunch. He'd tell her, "No wonder you don't have friends, you're too busy playing with cartoons." He'd mimic her voice, exaggerating every syllable, turning her into a joke. And when she cried, that was fuel. He bragged about it later to his buddies, boasting that he could make her cry on command. The cruelty didn't stop at school. One evening, I was at my sister's house when Ryan strutted in, backpack slung over one shoulder, grinning ear to ear. "You should have seen it," he bragged. "Me and Jake kept telling Anna she was a freak. She cried right in front of everyone. It was hilarious. My stomach turned. You made her cry?" I asked. He shrugged. "She's weird. Someone had to tell her." "Ryan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you know what that feels like? Being laughed at, being told you're worthless." He rolled his eyes. "She needs to toughen up. It's middle school. That's life." I wanted to yell at him, to tell him life was hard enough without kids like him making it worse. But before I could say another word, my sister cut in. "Don't lecture him," she snapped. "You're always so hard on him. He's just being honest." Honest. That word stung. Honesty without kindness isn't honesty, it's cruelty. But my sister couldn't see the difference, and Ryan knew it. He knew she'd defend him. By winter, Ryan's reputation had spread. He was funny, he was sharp, he was fearless. But underneath that shine, there were whispers. Kids who avoided him, who flinched when he walked by. Teachers who praised his intelligence, but noted his disruptive humor. One teacher wrote in a progress note, "Ryan has great potential, but he needs to learn when a joke goes too far." Too far. The phrase followed him like a shadow, but no one ever drew the line. I remember one night vividly. My sister had gone out, and I was stuck babysitting. Ryan sat on the couch with his phone, scrolling through social media, laughing to himself. "What's so funny?" I asked. He grinned, holding up his screen. It was a photo of Anna. Someone had taken it in class when she dropped her binder and her papers scattered everywhere. Ryan had captioned it, "Gotta catch all your friends, oh wait, you don't have any." The post had likes, comments with laughing emojis. I stared at him, horrified. "Ryan, take that down." "Why?" he asked. "Everyone thinks it's funny." "It's not funny. It's cruel. You're humiliating her." He frowned, almost genuinely confused. "But it's just a joke. Just a joke." His favorite shield. His excuse. I took a deep breath. "One day, Ryan, you're going to hurt the wrong person. And when that happens, it won't be funny anymore." He looked at me for a moment, then smirked. "Maybe, but until then, it works." And with that, he turned back to his phone, his laughter filling the room. Middle school gave Ryan exactly what he wanted, an audience. Bigger than the dinner table, bigger than the neighborhood. And the more he was applauded, the bolder he became. But with every joke, every taunt, every tear he drew from someone else, I felt the dread grow heavier inside me. Because cruelty doesn't stay small. It grows, it festers, it spreads. And Ryan was only just getting started. Asterisk. Middle school isn't just awkward. It's competitive. Social hierarchies are established early, and those who understand the rules or the loopholes hold power. Ryan understood them, and he thrived in them. It started with subtle manipulations. A rumor here, a whispered insult there. He was no longer content with one-liners in the hallways. He wanted impact. He wanted control. And, most importantly, he wanted an audience that fed his ego. One Monday morning, I walked him to school, an old habit when his mother had an early shift. He had that same smirk I'd grown used to, a combination of charm and mischief. "You'll love this," he whispered, leaning close. I told Anna her lunch smelled like old socks. Everyone laughed. She didn't even notice I recorded it. My stomach dropped. "You recorded her?" "Yep," he said proudly. "I'm gonna show it at lunch. People will die laughing." I tried to hide my panic. "Ryan, that's not a joke. You're crossing a line." He looked at me, baffled. "It's school. Everyone does it. You just don't get it." And that was it. That shrugged. That smirk. That casual dismissal of empathy. By the end of the week, it became worse. The video circulated during lunch. Anna tried to ignore it, but kids whispered behind her back, laughed when she passed. She stopped sitting at tables she liked, avoided certain classrooms, avoided the playground. Ryan watched it all unfold, like a general surveying a battlefield. When I confronted him later that evening, he didn't even look guilty. "She needs to toughen up," he said again. "It's middle school. This is how it works. And my sister, she laughed. Not with him, not at him, but as if dismissing the conversation entirely. She didn't intervene. She couldn't see, or didn't want to. Ryan's tactics grew sharper. He didn't just rely on jokes anymore. He started planning. He knew the times Anna would be alone in the hallway, the benches where she ate lunch, the teacher's blind spots. He learned her schedule, almost obsessively, as if he were mapping her vulnerabilities. It wasn't long before the pranks escalated. He'd shove her binder off her desk, knock over her lunch, whisper insults that only she could hear. The public humiliation was deliberate, calculated, and often silent. Most kids didn't even realize he was targeting her. They just noticed her distress. The school noticed, eventually. Teachers pulled me aside during parent-teacher conferences. "Ryan is brilliant," one said, "but he has a way of getting under other students' skin. We're concerned about Anna in particular." I nodded, feeling both vindicated and helpless. "I understand, but he's smart. He knows exactly what he's doing." They nodded, uneasy. "We're trying to guide him, but he's persuasive." I knew what persuasive really meant: manipulation. Ryan had learned that words could bend others to his will, that fear and humiliation were tools he could wield with precision. At home, the tension escalated. Ryan's mother, blissfully unaware or in denial, praised his wit and confidence. "You're so clever, Ryan," she said one night. "I'm proud of you for standing up in class today." I felt my chest tighten. "Standing up?" I asked. "Do you know what he did?" She shook her head. "He's a natural leader. He's just playful." Again, the shield he hid behind. I tried reasoning with her. He's not just playful. He's intentionally hurting someone. If this continues, it won't stay harmless. She avoided my gaze. "You're being too hard. You've always been too serious." Too serious. The words stung. But it wasn't seriousness. It was awareness. Ryan continued to escalate. One Friday, I found out he'd organized a small prank campaign with his friends against Anna. Notes in her locker, whispered rumors, social media posts designed to make her feel isolated. Each act was small enough to avoid major punishment, but impactful enough to wound her. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "I'm just teaching her life lessons. She'll thank me later." And that smirk, that casual dismissal of someone else's suffering. I remember that night vividly. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. He was munching on leftover pizza, oblivious to the storm in my chest. "Ryan," I said, choosing my words carefully, "do you realize what you're doing? Making her cry, humiliating her. It's bullying. People will remember this. This can follow her forever." He chewed, then grinned. "She'll be fine. And besides," he leaned back, smirk widening, "it's middle school. She should toughen up." I felt a shiver run through me. This wasn't about toughness. It wasn't about jokes. This was cruelty with a method, a purpose, and it scared me. I started documenting incidents, text messages, social media posts, witness accounts, not to punish him, but to prepare for the day his mother would need proof that her son's charm had a dangerous edge. And then it happened. The moment that crystallized everything I feared. Ryan cornered Anna in the hallway during a change of classes. He whispered something cruel, timed perfectly so no teacher could hear. and the entire hallway watched her crumble without understanding why. A classmate stepped in to help her. But Ryan's eyes flicked up at me. He'd seen me watching from the doorway. The smirk never left his face. It was like he was daring me to stop him. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Ryan wasn't just teasing. He was asserting power. He was testing limits. And he knew exactly where those limits were. By the end of that semester, Ryan had established himself as both a figure of admiration and fear. Friends adored him, teachers tolerated him, parents praised him, and the victims like Honor suffered quietly, and I sat on the sidelines, powerless in some ways, desperate in others, because I knew it wasn't enough to confront him once or twice. The cruelty had taken root. It was a habit, a strategy, a game he was already winning. And if no one drew the line, what would happen when the stakes got higher? Middle school had taught Ryan more than just jokes. It had taught him timing, strategy, and most dangerously, confidence in cruelty. What had started as whispers in hallways became orchestrated campaigns designed to isolate, humiliate, and dominate. By now, Anna had stopped sitting at her usual lunch table. The whispers followed her from class to class. Teachers were aware, parents had been informed, but the damage was accumulating faster than anyone could stop it. And Ryan watched it all unfold, like a conductor overseeing a symphony. Every note perfectly timed to hurt. One Monday morning, I was walking Ryan to school, bracing myself for the day. "You'll never guess what happened," he said with a mischievous grin. I made Anna trip on the stairs. Everyone saw it. She fell, books everywhere, and she couldn't even get up before everyone laughed. My stomach sank. "Ryan, that's physical. That's crossing a line. You could hurt her seriously." He shrugged. "She was fine. She got up." It's funny, that word again. Always the shield. Funny for who? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "For you, or for her?" He looked at me, then away, dismissing me with a flick of his hand. And I realized something terrifying. Logic didn't reach him. Empathy didn't reach him. Consequences didn't reach him. At school, the escalation was obvious. Ryan began targeting multiple students simultaneously, carefully calibrating his attacks to maximize embarrassment while minimizing punishment. He'd whisper rumors, then record reactions. He'd steal small personal items, post them online with mocking captions, and ensure the teachers saw him acting innocent. Anna was the first, but she wasn't the only one. A boy named Liam had recently transferred from another district. Ryan noticed he was shy, awkward, always trying to avoid attention. Ryan started a quiet campaign, poking fun at his clothes, mimicking his voice, spreading exaggerated stories about his hobbies. The strategy was clear: attack the vulnerable, dominate the room, avoid blame. And it worked perfectly. At home, the tension between me and my sister was growing. I tried repeatedly to explain the severity of Ryan's actions. "Look," I said one evening, as Ryan played video games in the next room, "this isn't just teasing anymore. He's manipulating, isolating, even shaming these kids. That's not a phase. It's bullying, and it's escalating." She crossed her arms, exhaling sharply. "You're exaggerating. Ryan is brilliant, charming, funny. You're making him sound evil." I echoed, my voice rising. "I'm describing behavior that's cruel, intentional, and harmful. If you don't stop it now, It's going to get worse. Her eyes narrowed. You're being too hard. You've always hated being too serious about kids. He's my son. I know him better than you ever could. And that was the problem. She didn't see it. Or worse, she refused to see it. Ryan, meanwhile, began testing boundaries with me too. He knew I was the one adult who didn't laugh at his antics. One afternoon, he barged into the kitchen, holding a stack of Anna's notes he'd found in the hallway. "Look at this," he said, flipping through them. "It's hilarious. I might post this online too. What do you think?" I felt rage and fear mix in my chest. "Ryan, stop it. This isn't a joke. Give it back." He looked at me, genuinely confused, then smirked. "Relax. She'll survive. It's middle school. You're just being dramatic." I realized then that confrontation alone wasn't enough. Words didn't work. Threats didn't work. He had become too confident in his cruelty, too accustomed to adults excusing him, too skilled at turning everyone else into spectators. The school began to notice the pattern too. Teachers pulled me aside during a parent-teacher conference. "Your nephew is intelligent," one teacher said cautiously, "but he's affecting other students negatively. He's strategic, calculating. He knows exactly how to manipulate social situations." I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm worried. It's not harmless. He's learning control through cruelty, and I fear it will escalate." They exchanged uneasy glances. "We're doing our best, but it's difficult. Kids like him. They are persuasive. They charm adults. They isolate victims without leaving proof. Persuasive, charm, isolation, words that used to sound innocent now sounded like warnings. Ryan's behavior began to have psychological consequences for his victims. Anna started withdrawing entirely. Liam's confidence crumbled. Other kids, even if not targeted directly, began avoiding Ryan's presence. Fear and uncertainty rippled through the student body, and at home I tried more direct interventions. I asked him repeatedly to consider how his actions affected others. I tried showing him stories about empathy, kindness, and consequences. He listened. Superficially, he nodded. Superficially. But inside, I could see the calculations forming. One evening, I caught him on the family computer, messaging Anna with taunts. He had found her social media, discovered her online friends, and was now orchestrating another humiliation campaign. "Ryan, delete that," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're harassing her. Do you understand?" He looked at me, smirk fixed, eyes gleaming. "It's just fun. It's not real. I'm just teaching her life lessons." I felt helpless, because teaching life lessons shouldn't involve cruelty, isolation, and humiliation. But I knew I was losing the battle at home. My sister wouldn't back me up. Her blind faith in him was enabling the behavior. And Ryan knew it. Middle school had turned Ryan into a master of social manipulation. Every whisper, every prank, every carefully timed joke was another calculated strike. He had an audience, followers, and, most dangerously, immunity at home. But every game has a breaking point. It started with a single incident, seemingly small but devastating. Anna had brought a project to school, a science display she'd spent weeks crafting. Ryan noticed her standing alone in the corner of the classroom, the display precariously balanced on a folding table. He leaned in, whispered a joke, and then nudged the table. Not hard, just enough. The display crashed to the floor. Papers flew everywhere. Anna froze, mortified, as classmates laughed. The teacher, unfortunately, was distracted at the other end of the room. Anna's humiliation was complete. I was called to school that afternoon. The principal spoke softly but firmly. Ryan has intelligence, charisma, but he's taken it too far. His actions toward Anna have crossed a line. We need parental intervention immediately. I nodded. I understand. I've tried speaking to him at home. He's clever. He knows exactly what he's doing. The principal sighed. We need to stop this before it escalates further. He's learned the mechanics of humiliation. If unchecked, this could lead to serious consequences. Unchecked. That word echoed in my mind as I drove home. At home, I tried again with my sister. She had just come back from work, tired but smiling. Ryan was upstairs, no doubt plotting his next act. We need to talk, I said. Ryan crossed a line today. The school is concerned, Anna. She's been emotionally hurt. This has to stop. She shook her head, fatigued. He's just a kid. Kids push boundaries. You're making it sound worse than it is. Worse than it is, I said, voice rising. He made a child cry in front of the entire school. He destroyed her work intentionally. This isn't pushing boundaries, it's bullying. And it won't stop unless you intervene. Her eyes narrowed. You're too harsh. You don't understand him like I do. You can't dictate how I raise my son. I clenched my fists. I wanted to scream. I wanted her to see what I saw. But I knew words alone weren't enough. Ryan had learned that adults who dismissed him more didn't act were allies in his game. That evening, I sat down with Ryan. For the first time, it was a direct confrontation without the shield of just joking. Ryan, I said, looking him in the eyes, this stops now. What you did to Ona destroying her project, making her cry was cruel. It's not a joke. It's not funny. Do you understand? He tilted his head, smirk flickering, then vanishing for a moment. Uncle, she'll survive. Everyone survives. That's life. No, Ryan, that's not life. That's harm, and you're responsible. Right now, you're learning that cruelty works, but it won't always. One day, someone won't forgive you. Someone will fight back. He laughed softly, almost amused. Maybe, but that's later. Right now, I'm winning. That was the word, the game he lived for. And for the first time, I realized that simple reasoning wouldn't work. Threats, logic, appeals to empathy, they all failed. The next day at school, I followed up with the counselor and Anna's parents. We discussed formal measures, detentions, interventions, monitoring, counseling for Ryan. But even with these structures, the pattern persisted. Ryan had learned to skirt consequences, to charm adults, to manipulate peers. Home, tension reached a fever pitch. My sister, exhausted and defensive, refused to see Ryan's behavior for what it truly was. She shielded him, excused him, praised him when he showed charm, and dismissed concern when he showed cruelty. I realized something chilling. If left unchecked, Ryan's behavior wouldn't stop. It wouldn't diminish with age. It would grow, finding new victims, creating more elaborate schemes, and eventually, the consequences could be serious socially and legally. That night, I tried one last approach, a heart-to-heart. I wanted Ryan to feel what he had done, not just understand it intellectually. "Ryan," I said, voice calm but heavy, "imagine it's you. Imagine someone made fun of you every day, recorded you, spread rumors, pushed you down, and no one stopped them. How would that feel?" He paused. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding. Then he smiled, that same confident, invincible smile. "Uncle," he said softly, almost whispering, "I think I'd fight back. Or maybe I'd just be better at it next time." My chest tightened. That was it. That was the truth. He enjoyed control, the thrill of winning social battles at the expense of others. And with his mother protecting him, there was no barrier strong enough to stop him. That night, as I lay awake, I realized something terrifying. Confrontation alone wasn't enough. Guidance alone wasn't enough. Love alone wasn't enough. Ryan's cruelty was methodical, rehearsed, and fueled by the very adults who excused him. The only path forward would require consequences, boundaries, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about Ryan, but about the family enabling him. The breaking point had come, and I knew that after this, nothing would be the same. High school was a whole new arena. The hallways were longer, the crowds denser, and the audience so. The audience was bigger than anything Ryan had ever faced. For him, this was perfect. More students to impress, more targets to exploit, more chances to assert dominance. He walked into freshman orientation with the same smirk I'd known since middle school. Teachers complimented his confidence, classmates gravitated toward him, and he thrived on it. But this time, the stakes were higher. The cruelty needed strategy. The audience was more discerning. And the consequences, though subtle at first, could be far-reaching. Within weeks, Ryan identified the outsiders. There was Leah, a quiet girl in the art club who wore thrifted clothes and never raised her hand in class. Then Jordan, a boy obsessed with comics, who drew elaborate sketches in his notebooks. Ryan's eyes lit up with the thrill of new prey. He started small whispered jokes in the cafeteria, subtle insults in hallways, strategically timed eye rolls during class discussions. Unlike middle school, where most adults were oblivious, high school teachers noticed the patterns but found it hard to pinpoint malicious intent. Ryan had mastered plausible deniability at home. His mother continued to protect him. She praised his cleverness, called him a witty boy with charm, and dismissed any concerns I raised. I realized that if I didn't act, Ryan would learn to wield this charm like a shield for increasingly severe cruelty. Ryan's tactics became more sophisticated, no longer relying solely on verbal jokes. He began orchestrating situations to isolate and embarrass his targets. He learned social media manipulation, posting memes and inside jokes that mocked peers without explicit cruelty that teachers could easily detect. He would subtly seed rumors, watch them spread, then step in as the helper or funny commentator to maintain his image while deepening the humiliation of his victims. Anna, Leah, Jordan each had their own torment tailored by Ryan's cunning mind. He would intercept notes, misplace personal belongings, or subtly sabotage projects, and all of it was cloaked in humor or charm. So adults rarely intervened. I attempted interventions at home, trying conversations about empathy, consequences, and accountability. Ryan listened but never internalized the lessons. Every discussion only seemed to reinforce his belief that the world responded to power and cleverness. High school had become his laboratory. Every peer, Every social interaction was a test, a puzzle, and a source of entertainment. And the stakes, much higher than they'd ever been in middle school. Inevitably, high school brought consequences, small at first, but significant. One day, Ryan's schemes backfired. A post intended to humiliate Leah was traced back to him by a teacher. He was pulled into the principal's office, a rare moment where charm couldn't shield him completely. The reprimand was milder detention, a warning, a conversation with parents, but it shook him slightly. For the first time, he realized that the social world could push back. At home, my sister minimized the event. "See, he learned his lesson," she said. But I saw the calculation in Ryan's eyes. He wasn't remorseful. He was plotting the next move. The encounter had proven only that he needed to be smarter, subtler. I realized that small consequences alone would never correct behavior fueled by habit, arrogance, and a lack of empathy. Ryan needed structured accountability, guidance, and a confrontation with reality. Otherwise, the stakes would escalate. So would the potential damage to his peers by the end of his freshman year. Ryan had established dominance in his social circles. He was respected, feared, and adored in equal measure, but the pattern of cruelty left a trail. Some students avoided him, some were permanently hurt, and teachers increasingly watched him warily. At home, tension simmered. My sister refused to see the full scope of the problem, praising his wit and dismissing my warnings. Ryan, sensing the lack of boundaries, grew bolder. Every new school day became an opportunity to test limits, manipulate peers, and assert control. I sat alone one night, reflecting on the trajectory. The charm, the intelligence, the social dominance, they were gifts that could have been channeled positively. But unchecked, they had become tools for manipulation and harm. The breaking point was approaching. I knew that the next confrontation, whether with school authorities, family, or Ryan himself, would define not just the high school years, but potentially the rest of his life. High school junior year brought consequences Ryan couldn't charm or manipulate away. It began with a parent-teacher meeting. Leah's parents had become proactive after repeated harassment, documenting posts, pranks, and rumors. They demanded action. The principal finally had undeniable proof of Ryan's coordinated bullying campaigns. Ryan sat in the office, perfectly composed, as if the storm around him was part of the show. His mother was on his side, insisting he's just a witty boy. This is just adolescent humor. But the principal's patience had limits. "Ryan, your actions have crossed into harassment. You've caused measurable emotional harm. This isn't a game anymore. There will be consequences." Ryan tilted his head, curiosity overtaking smugness. He had never faced anything like this. The detention, social probation, and mandatory counseling were small, but they were the first real boundary he couldn't charm away. At home, I tried to use this moment as a teaching opportunity. "Ryan," I said gently, "the world doesn't reward cruelty forever. Some lines can't be crossed without consequences." He studied me silently. For a moment, I thought he might reflect, but then his smirk returned. He was thinking, not about what he had done, but how to recover without losing his social standing. The repercussions spread quickly. Ryan's friends began questioning his actions. Some stayed loyal, enjoying the thrill of his schemes. Others, uncomfortable with the growing consequences, distanced themselves. At school, Ryan's social dominance faced its first cracks. Teachers, students, and parents were no longer naive bystanders. The whispers of disapproval, the sideways glances, the subtle social isolation, these were things Ryan hadn't fully anticipated. He began recalibrating his behavior, less overtly cruel, more strategic. But the cruelty didn't vanish. It evolved. He targeted more subtle vulnerabilities, like whispering half-truths, editing photos to embarrass, or isolating peers quietly. Anna and Leah, once victims of public humiliation, started finding small ways to reclaim dignity. Their confidence slowly rebuilt. Ryan noticed that was a new variable in his social experiment: resistance. I observed him carefully. He was still brilliant, still manipulative, still charming, but now he was beginning to learn the limits of power. At home, tensions reached new heights. I confronted my sister directly, laying out the full scope of Ryan's behavior, documented evidence in hand. "You're shielding him from reality," I said. "He's learned that he can manipulate adults, charm teachers, and hurt others without consequence. This is dangerous." She reacted defensively. "You're exaggerating. He's my son. You don't understand him." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I see the pattern, and if you don't change your approach, he will escalate. You're enabling him." For the first time, I saw her hesitate. The evidence, combined with school warnings, forced cracks in her denial. She began to realize that praise alone couldn't protect Ryan from the consequences of his own behavior, and it couldn't protect others from him. Ryan, sensing the family tension, reacted with a mix of irritation and fascination. He tested boundaries more subtly, now studying adults' reactions as much as peers. Every conversation became a mini-game of power. The true turning point arrived unexpectedly. During a school project, Ryan's subtle manipulations backfired spectacularly. He had orchestrated a scenario to embarrass Leah during a group presentation. But the plan collapsed when other students called him out, and the teacher witnessed his scheming firsthand. For the first time, Ryan faced public accountability. The classroom was tense. Ryan's usual charm failed to diffuse the situation. He experienced a rare taste of social repercussion, embarrassment, isolation, and disapproval from both peers and authority figures. At home that night, I spoke to him quietly. "Ryan, this is a lesson. You can't charm your way out of every mistake. Every action has consequences. If you choose cruelty, it will find a way back to you." He didn't smile this time. He was thoughtful, maybe even uneasy, and I realized something profound. This was the moment where change became possible, not through punishment alone, but through experience, reflection, and boundaries finally enforced. High school senior year began with a quiet tension. Ryan was no longer the untouchable king of social manipulation. The lessons of Part 4 had left marks, a few public embarrassments, social consequences, and his mother finally seeing the repercussions of shielding him. I watched him navigate the hallways differently, now less overt cruelty, more subtle strategy. He still teased, still joked, but there was a hesitation, a recognition that actions had consequences. The first real crack of empathy had appeared, though it was small, flickering. Anna and Leah had regained confidence. Their laughter was no longer shadowed by fear. Ryan observed this, perhaps with curiosity, perhaps with envy. It was the first time he faced peers who would not be easily manipulated, and it shook him. At home, my sister had softened her stance. She admitted that her protection of Ryan had enabled some of his worst behaviors. For the first time, she listened to me without defensiveness. Together, we set new boundaries, emphasizing accountability, empathy, and honesty. Ryan resisted at first, as expected. But over time, the combination of social feedback, school guidance, and family rules began to influence him. Ryan's senior year presented opportunities for redemption. He started helping younger students, initially as a calculated move to regain reputation after a social misstep. But slowly, his actions took on more genuine intent. He tutored classmates, offered guidance in group projects, and occasionally defended students he might once have tormented. At first, he did it for appearances, still measuring reactions. But small successes, seeing a peer understand a lesson he helped teach, noticing a smile from someone he supported, began to affect him. There was a shift, subtle but real. The school noticed. Teachers commented on his growth, even as they remained cautious. Ryan's intelligence and charm were now tools for leadership and support, not just manipulation. The transition was fragile, uneven, but it existed. The family dynamic changed alongside. Ryan. My sister accepted that parenting is not just about praise and protection. True guidance includes boundaries, accountability, and sometimes difficult truths. Ryan's experiences had forced her to confront her own blind spots and habits. I reflected on my own role, too. Intervention alone wasn't enough. Had to balance confrontation with empathy, discipline with understanding. Standing up to Ryan, even when his mother defended him, had been necessary but painful. We had hard conversations as a family. Ryan was encouraged to reflect on past actions, recognize the hurt he caused, and take responsibility. He resisted, he argued, he deflected, but slowly, a dialogue formed. He began to see the weight of choices, not just the thrill of victory. By the end of senior year, Ryan was not cured or perfect. No one changes overnight. But he had grown. His cruelty, once confident and unchecked, was tempered by consequences and reflection. Anna, Leah, and other peers had healed, finding strength and confidence. Some avoided him entirely. Others cautiously rebuilt social connections, including Ryan in a limited, monitored capacity. The scars remained, but growth was possible for all involved. As for me, watching Ryan's journey had been a lesson in vigilance, patience, and courage. Bullying doesn't disappear by ignoring it. Protection alone doesn't teach empathy. Real change requires consequences, reflection, and consistent boundaries. And finally, I saw a glimmer of hope. Ryan, once a master of cruelty, now navigating a world where power came with responsibility, learning that influence without empathy was dangerous, and that true strength included kindness. The story closed not with perfection, but with growth, accountability, and the possibility of redemption, a lesson that resonated for both victims and the perpetrator, and for all who watched, listened, and learned.